Let's talk about a book that's been changing lives since 1959. David J. Schwartz's classic, The Magic of Thinking Big, isn't just some old self-help book. It's basically a user's manual for your brain, showing you how to rewire it for massive success. So, let's dive into the core principles that make this book so incredibly powerful, even today.
And it all kicks off with this one central idea. Schwartz wants you to think of your belief system like a thermostat. It doesn't just wish for success, it actually regulates the environment to create the level of success you're set for. In other words, your belief sets the absolute ceiling for what you can achieve.
So that brings up the big question, right? Why do some people just seem to achieve so much more than everyone else? Well, Schwartz has a pretty simple answer. He says it's almost never about raw talent or being a genius or even getting lucky. The real difference maker, it's simply the size of their thinking. The gap isn't in ability, it's in their mindset.
Okay, so to really tackle this, we first need to know what we're up against. We have to put a name to the problem. And Schwartz calls this universal habit of underachievement the failure disease.
And the number one symptom of this failure disease? He has a great name for it, Excusitis. And look, this isn't about making an excuse once in a while. We all do that. This is a chronic, deep-seated habit of justifying why you can't do something. But here's the kicker. When you look at super successful people, this disease is just absent. They don't make excuses. They take total ownership.
And this excusitis tends to pop up in four main ways. You've got the health excuse, the I'm not smart enough excuse, the I'm too old or too young excuse, and of course the classic I just have bad luck excuse. And each one of these feels so real, so legitimate, right? But what Schwartz argues is that they are nothing more than self-imposed cages we build to avoid trying. But really, the excuses, they're just the surface-level stuff. The real problem, the virus that's causing this whole disease in the first place, is fear. Fear, he says, is something we actually learn. And it's this learned fear that completely paralyzes us, hijacking our potential and keeping it on lockdown. So, how do you fight it? What's the cure? Well, Schwartz gives us this incredibly powerful three-word prescription. And the logic is so simple, but so profound. You can't just think your way out of being afraid. It just doesn't work. You have to act your way out of it. Action is the only thing that breaks the cycle. All right, so we've diagnosed the disease. Now let's talk about the cure. We're going to pivot from the problem to the solution. And that is all about building the power of your belief. This is where everything starts to change. So Schwartz tells this great story to illustrate the point. It's about this guy who's working as a tool and die maker, feeling totally stuck in a mediocre job, just not providing for his family the way he wanted to. And because he saw himself as average, that's exactly what his life was. But then, one night, something clicks. He has this total light bulb moment. After some really honest self-reflection, he realizes the only thing separating him from his successful peers wasn't talent. It was the negative story he was constantly telling himself. They weren't any smarter than him. They just believed they deserved more, and they acted on it. And get this, the result wasn't something that took months or years. It was immediate. The very next day, with nothing changed but the belief in his own head, he walks into his boss's office and confidently asks for a pretty significant raise. And he gets it. His external world changed the very moment his internal world did. So to help us understand this, Schwartz gives us this really cool mental model he calls the thought factory. Imagine your mind is a factory, okay? And in this factory, you've got two foremen running the show. There's Mr. Triumph, and he's the guy who produces all the positive you can do this thoughts. And then there's Mr. Defeat, who just cranks out all the negative you're gonna fail thoughts. And the most important part, you are the manager of this factory. You decide which foreman gets all the work. Okay, so how do you make sure Mr. Triumph is working overtime and Mr. Defeat gets laid off? Schwartz lays out three really practical steps. First, you have to consciously choose to focus on success, not failure. Second, constantly, and I mean constantly, remind yourself that you are way better than you give yourself credit for. And third, you've got to believe big. Stop playing small. It's often no harder to achieve a big goal than a small one. Okay, so we've got the diagnosis. And we've got the cure. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty, the actual toolkit you can start using every single day to build this big thinking mindset. First thing in the toolkit, your words. This is so important. The vocabulary you use literally builds the world you live in. Small thinkers use a language of limitation. They say things like, I can't, or it's impossible, which just shuts everything down. But big thinkers, they use a language of possibility. They ask, okay, how can I? Or let's find a way. See the difference? One closes doors, the other one kicks them open. All right, next up in the toolkit is a 5-step game plan for building rock-solid confidence. First, you have to isolate your fear. Know exactly what it is. Second, take action. Remember, action cures fear. Third, make sure you only deposit positive experiences and thoughts into your memory bank. Fourth, practice thinking good things about other people. It eliminates jealousy and insecurity. And finally, you gotta act confident to feel confident. And that principle is so crucial, it's worth saying again. Do what you fear, and fear disappears. It's the exact same idea behind what psychologists now call exposure therapy. When you voluntarily face the thing you're scared of, you literally rewire your brain to understand there's no real threat. The fear just dissolves. And the last tool in the kit is a big one. Manage your environment. You have to go first class. Think about it. Your mind is constantly taking in data from your surroundings to figure out what's real. So surround yourself with ambitious, positive people and high-quality information. And you have to actively avoid what Schwartz calls the thought poison of gossip and negativity. So let's bring this all together, because the whole point of this isn't just to have bigger thoughts in a vacuum. It's about translating those thoughts into a bigger, better, more fulfilling life. And if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Thinking big is not some genetic gift you're born with. It is not reserved for a special, lucky few. It is a conscious, deliberate choice. A choice you get to make every single day, in every single moment. And this quote from Schwartz just says it all, doesn't it? The size of your internal world, your thoughts, your dreams, your beliefs, is what directly creates the size of your external world. A bigger mindset, inevitably, almost automatically, leads to a bigger life. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you know how your mindset works, now that you know you have the tools to expand it, the only real question left is, how big are you willing to think?